Never has there been a better time to wear black. A friend is dead. EdTheTechie, may you rest in peace. This show is a tribute to him. Just a nod. I'm going to replay the podcast me and him did together a few years back. And I got to say that I loved that guy. He was beautiful. For a load of people who knew him on a professional basis and knew him through messages and through other things, he was kind-hearted, he was funny, he was charming, he was all that. And I'll say it in a bit coming up. I had a little walk earlier and I recorded a piece that I'm going to play in a little bit. But I wanted to say something extra on top of what I say there. You know, this is a man who he helped me through a really, really hard time when my life was at its hardest. I knew who my friends were, and there was someone who was there for me during that period, and I will never forget it. And he's not here now. It's really sad for everyone who knew him, and sad for everyone he affected. And that guy, he didn't only get us laughing, but got us thinking too. And those who knew him well enough, wow, we were lucky enough to know a good man. And he's not here, so God bless, rest in peace. Like I say, I'm gonna play something that I recorded earlier in the graveyard, and then replay the podcast that he and I did together, the Newspace podcast. I think it was about near the end of 2023. I'm gonna miss him. I know a lot of people are. So thanks for joining me on this tribute to a great man, EdTheTechie, and rest in peace, my friend. Today, my friends, I'm taking a walk in the graveyard. And I'm thinking about my friend, Chanter, EdTheTechie, man who I first encountered, of course, during all the COVID and Ukraine era, especially. Someone who, when I interact with people, often they don't interact back with me, but Ed was someone who he was like me in that sense. You know, he wasn't scared to have a conversation with someone, ever. Never afraid to speak his mind in a way that was direct and allowed you to properly converse. And he had a really good mind for the mimetic. Something that not all of us have. Taking a walk in the local graveyard with my lovely dog Bellaboo, who's there waiting to see which direction we go in. And I'm thinking about my friend Ed. And the thing about Ed is, like I say, he didn't mind conversing with anybody, which meant he had such a large amount of friends, such a large amount of people who had such a great amount of respect for him. He was funny, clever. He was just a lovely human being, welcoming, like not many people are. Within probably a year and a half of me and Ed chatting away, he invited me to stay over his house in Brighton, welcomed me in, and we had a really lovely weekend. We watched a load of the classic movies. Gotta say, you know, it was a bit of a geek night we had. on the one night especially, spent the day watching things like 2001 Space Odyssey, Doctor Strangelove, went with the classics. He knew my work, I knew his work. We had the same mindset about what we think is up and what we think is down in the political world, but none of that matters when you're just two mates hanging around. And he was such a lovely guy. He was extremely welcoming, extremely interesting chap in loads of different ways. Very funny. There's not many people who can make friends with a seagull, I tell you. Not like Ed did. Ed was open-minded, clever, witty. He was very good at what he did, especially when it came to commentary. In the same way, though, he was, on occasion, a little bit nervous. He wasn't exactly, he didn't exactly come out of his box all of the time. Just when he was surrounded by people he loved and people he respected and people he felt like he'd be about, he really came out and shone. But he was also pretty shy in many ways, He wasn't all bravado and thinking he's the best. He was humble in loads of different ways, and everybody who knew him would say the greatest things about him, and they would all be true. He was a guy who was really kind character to everyone he knew, and he's going to be missed, not just by me, not just by a few in the community, but of course his family and his friends and all of the rest. And so sad, man. You think about the fact you always should have done more, and you always should have been around more, and you always should have seen them more, and etc. once they're gone, but they're gone. So EdTheTechie, you're such a beautiful man, love you. I'm gonna replay the podcast me and him did. He come on the Newspace podcast. I'm gonna replay that now and think about my good friend EdTheTechie, a beautiful guy who had a heart of gold. Love him. Passed just a couple of days ago. God rest in peace, my friend. Go well, travel well. Hello everybody and welcome to the Newspace podcast. I'm Johnny Vedmore. I'm here today with someone who I consider a friend, so this is going to be quite fun and it's going to be a brilliant conversation. We're going to probably go down a couple of rabbit holes here and a couple of rabbit holes here. This is with EdTheTechie. You'll find him on Twitter, Getter, whatever, as EdTheTechie. And I first met him as a memer, high quality meme enthusiast, I would say, and general techie, generally a nice guy. He was doing lots of memes around the place, and they were really clever stuff, and I was really enjoying it. And then we started talking, and before you knew it, we were just backwards and forwards, and then came in the Twitter crunch, the thing where everybody got crushed on Twitter for a short amount of time, where suddenly all your friends disappeared, your network of people just vanished all of a sudden, and EdTheTechie was one of those. And there was two people that I was calling for reinstatement through the entirety of that time, and one was EdTheTechie and the other was Jinx, because Jinx is naughty and I do like him too. And both came back eventually, and it's progressed. I've been so lucky to go and meet Ed and hang out with him properly, and get invited into his life in some to some extent. So This is Ed. He's from Brighton. He knows a lot about this and a lot about that. Little bits about this, little bits about that. And he's going to tell us all about it. Ed, how are you doing today?
I'm very good, Johnny. Thank you. And thank you very much for that really nice introduction. I consider you a friend as well. And it was really great hanging out with you that weekend you came down.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, no, I thoroughly enjoyed it. And hello, everybody. This is me. Um, People might know me, people might not. Yeah, there's not much special. I just like making memes and making people laugh. Um,
Making memes, making people laugh, but also, treating people with a base sense of like, honesty and understanding, cutting through the stuff too. That's what memes do, is what art does, isn't it?
well, that's the whole point. It's one of the most powerful weapons we've got, quite frankly. And if you think about there's actually a great meme floating around about memes, which is of a dinosaur basically with a turtle, and the turtle's just hidden away, and the text over the dinosaur is like $1 trillion marketing machine, and then on the little turtle it's like loads of little people on Photoshop. And the humor it cuts through so much. It really does. I mean, you can't be afraid of something if you're too busy laughing at it, and
Mhm.
you can't take something seriously if you're too busy laughing at it. Um, and I mean, I exclusively focus on world leaders and people in the public eye. I very occasionally I make a meme of a friend, but I will restrict myself to people who cartoonists and political commentators and stuff are all lampooning in the press or not lampooning enough. Um,
Mhm.
and yeah, I'm kind of relentless. My current thing at the moment is replacing Rishi Sunak's head with Roland Rat, which if you know me on Twitter, you will have seen them. And every single picture that Rishi Sunak's Twitter account puts out of him that I can Photoshop, yeah, it gets the Roland Rat treatment. And I know I make quite a few people laugh, but mainly I make myself laugh, which is why I do it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I got you with that one. I got you with that one. I think you touch on a few things there. One thing is that, and these are very serious because whenever you have like some form of cultural output, some sort of artistic something, it always like makes you realize how life works and the prisms that we all look through and stuff. And so it's all very intriguing. What it links in with me at the moment and what I've been looking into is how PR and marketing basically are the filter, the photo filter, the filter app for nearly every single thing in our society. Every single thing gets its separate treatment of PR and marketing in a way that is really intrusive. So I was telling someone, I'll tell you this quick story. I was telling someone about how policy is made. A nice girl who strokes my cat. That's not a euphemism. She isn't a nice girl, and she does stroke my cat outside my house. I often go outside and I find her there, and she's petting away and she's enjoying herself. And I think she may be a little bit on the spectrum, to be honest. And I said to her something, and she replied something back and mentioned 20-mile-per-hour speed limits. And I was like, basically the same policy institutes make these policies for both parties, so it's irrelevant. And she said, "No, that's not true. That's not true." And I said, no, it's just like policy institutes make policy, and then they sell it to political parties, who then sell it to the people to get into government, and then they implement it into a legal framework, and that's how it works. Policy institute first, then politicians. Politicians don't actually come up with policy. Policy institutes do. And she ran off down the street. I mean, really ran off down the street. But then I got to thinking why that was so scary. And you take away what you're doing specifically is you're taking away the filter of PR and marketing. You reverse it. And that is a filter that is on everything. You can't get the policy institute doesn't get to its policy across if it doesn't market it and PR it well enough, and it doesn't get to government, and then it doesn't get into a legal framework and so on. And if we can find ways to do what you're doing in one section, and we reverse PR and marketing, I think that's what I see in what you're doing. It's like reverse PR.
I think that's what largely what memes are, actually, Johnny. I think that it's um, but I think they're born out of a sense of frustration, and you try and put into words what that frustration is, or you try and you try and express the frustration. And I mean, I tend not to use a lot of words on my memes. I like the pictures to stand for them on their own because it gives people the opportunity to create their own words about them. And also, it has the other benefit of not being, you can't OCR it, so you can't have a computer scan it and read words and then use those to filter it or
Mm.
censor it or whatever. I'm also, I should
How
say,
long? Just quickly, just for,
yeah.
remember that last bit. How long do you think they'll be able to scan the picture and know what the picture means?
Well, the thing is that it's easy enough for them to scan the picture, but when if they scanned one of my Roland memes, all they would scan is a picture with a Roland rat face. So they might be able to identify the fact that it's got Roland rat in it, but the machine wouldn't necessarily be able to distinguish between one of my memes and a screenshot from a Roland rat TV series, for example. And just for the record, so that people know I'm not a Labour Party supporter, I replace Keir Starmer's head with Beaker, which is my new thing,
Yeah, I like it.
um, and that will be. It took me a while. I had to go through different ones. I tried him as Sooty. I tried him as a Womble. I tried all sorts of different heads for Keir Starmer, and then it wasn't my idea actually. Someone online, I can't remember who it was on Twitter, made the suggestion, and I just thought, yeah, with that red hair, it's just it's so him, and he's a dark one.
Yeah, ultimate Muppet, ultimate Muppet. I really want to go into next year. I am going into a lot of the Labour Party. Now I know you're not. You say you're not Labour Party, so this interests me a little bit because what do you consider? Do you consider yourself on the current political spectrum at all, or are you like me? Are you kind of like everybody's a bloody loon, and they're telling you bollocks all over the place? Which one are you going with?
I'm like you. I mean, I'm politically homeless
Hmm.
before COVID happened and before all of the nonsense with all of this right wing label that the certain sections of society like to throw around at people like me. If you actually looked at how I think society should be organized,
Go
I'm
on, my friend. How would you like it to be
well,
organized?
no, but I mean, I would probably be relatively centrist because there's certain
Mhm.
views that I've got. I mean, for example, I think that every country should have a Second Amendment to start with. And I'm in favor of capital punishment, but I'm not in favor of corrupt courts. And so, as long as there's a possibility that an innocent person is going to be um, executed, I don't think that we've got in any business executing people. And I don't think there's any such thing as a
Mm,
completely fair justice system. But whereas I
mm.
always considered myself probably more left of center because I do believe in things like social safety nets and stuff like that. But now I'm a right wing extremist.
Yeah, I know. Me
Um,
too.
and
My
and
dad was a steel worker. Now
yeah,
I'm Lenin or something. Oh no, not the opposite. Sorry, I'm Hitler. No, he's even a bit left wing. Who was wrong? Who was on the right? I don't know. All of the dictators were on the left, weren't they?
well, I mean, this is the bizarre thing about someone like Hitler, because I mean, it was Mussolini who coined the term fascism, and Mussolini said that fascism is a merger of corporate and state power, and so he was right.
They
But then
called it capitalism. Sorry,
yeah,
go
but
on.
but then if you look at someone like Hitler, he was people would describe him as a fascist, but he was actually much more left. I mean, it was the National
Mm,
Socialist Party,
you know.
and so he was. I mean, he was not. It wasn't communist, but he wasn't that sort of left. But all of these labels and all of this right and left, it winds me up because I think that it's just uniparty. It's two cheeks of the same backside, and
Hmm.
I mean, you, I it irritates me when people who are supposedly call themselves awake sit there talking about leftists and rightists and stuff
Hmm.
like that, and I'm like, well, you've obviously clearly got a bit more waking up to do, kind of thing,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
because I mean, Marx was funded by a lot of the same people that funded people like Adam Smith, and I mean, the whole Marxist ideology is just it's I mean, it wasn't even well written, for crying out loud. I don't know if
Mhm.
anyone's tried to listening has
It,
tried to actually read Das Kapital,
Oh my God. Do you know,
but
I keep what you got in mind there, but I decided I'd try and read it. This was probably about 2017, 2018, when I was still being called a communist a lot. And then I had a real hard time reading it because it's so badly written. So I ended up going, okay, I was working nights in a hotel. I'll just listen to the audiobook over and over again. So every night for a week, I kept trying to listen to the audiobook. And it was just a guy going, and look at you, all of my enemies. Ha ha ha. I'm going to create something, and yours is bad and mine is good. And that was basically it. I just seemed to be fundamentally a really immature man being gloating about how good he is and how clever he is and how good his system is, while like knowing what his system actually has done over the years. Just it makes you feel sick. It makes you it's just
yeah.
not attached to based in any reality. Like
But then, if you look at a lot of that, I mean, the communist ideology, all of none of that is based in reality either. It's
mhm,
all, I mean, they don't take into account the way that economic systems work. And I'm not necessarily in favor of just allowing the market to do everything, because corporations are psychopaths. I mean, this has been established by all sorts of different psychology studies and everything else, that the people, psychopaths, either become mass murderers or they go into business. And it's so you can't just have unfettered capitalism. But what Marx was proposing is like fairy dreamland. And what he actually created, what they ended up creating with it, is more tyranny, more
yeah, yeah.
autocracy, more of the enslavement. I mean, there's a I like voluntarism, which is the new name that anarchists are calling what they believe in.
Mm-hmm.
That because you can have you don't need it's not about no rules, it's about no rulers.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, if you go on the basis that human societies are self-organizing, then you can't have mayhem. But there has to be, I mean, there have to be some political philosophers out there that aren't on the right and aren't on the left and have some good ideas. But people like that never get heard, because the way that academia works and the way that the modern world works is you have to be on board with whatever the current narrative is.
What's
And you
bothered,
can't. Hang on.
I was going to say what's bothered me, like when I think about Soviet Union and you think about all of the foibles and mistakes that were present within the Soviet Union, you got like warehouses full of the same size shoes that no one's going to wear, yeah, and other things like that. And I think that was just really representative of people. And again, you've just brought up something very interesting where you said, has anybody actually read Das Kapital or any of Marx's like work? Have you like once you actually read it, you realize that it's not easy to implement or understand. That a lot of it is just like blue versus red or just one team versus the other, so it's just a nonsense at the end of it, combative nonsense. And that the reason why there was all these warehouses full of these things that no one was going to use was quite simply that everybody pretends to understand it, so it says yes, we're going to enact it, and then they're just waiting for the other person to enact it so that then they can just follow the lead, but no one's taking the lead because no one knows what's going on. And that's what it turned into if you question the fact, the state of hypernormalization that occurs from that, then you get sent to the gulags, and that's
Yeah,
basically it. Yeah.
absolutely. And anyone, if you look at all of the great advancements in human technology and human thought and art and everything else, they all came from the periphery. They all came from the mavericks. They all came from the people who were called crazy until they were called geniuses. The radical ideas are never accepted immediately. And what we have now with all of the scientific papers, I mean, it's like not many people know, that a Dutch company called Elsevier Publications owns almost all of the scientific journals. And it's you have these gatekeepers. It's like you have Google that owns search results. You have Facebook that owns whatever the hell's Facebook owns. It's Facebook seems to be less and less. It seems to be less point in it by each passing day. I mean, it's basically where I go to remember birthdays. So that usually so that I don't get in trouble with my mother for forgetting someone's birthday. But all of my friends and family know I'm useless at it anyway. But
Yeah, I forget all birthdays standard, so there you go. I'm sorry to everybody involved.
and I mean, and you have these. I was just talking to a friend on the phone earlier this afternoon, and she has kids. And she was saying how her kids all want to be YouTube influencers or YouTubers. How is YouTuber a profession? Surely you have to have a profession
Yeah.
which you then YouTube about. I mean, you can't just YouTube my boring little life without. I mean, you
I
look at the.
understand it though. I understand it. I've
Mm,
been there. I've been there wanting to do something and not realizing that you've got to find something to do before you can do the something, you know?
yeah.
That you actually have to find, you have to get some content in that character and content for any YouTube channel you make. Now, I can tell you that I now create a lot of content for YouTube and the stuff. And I just like record everything basically. That's what I do. I go around recording everything. And that's being a YouTuber in a sense. You just got to go out and do stuff all of the time. And the thing is about the kids is that they're not. They want to do all of this, but they're going to hang around on benches and smoke weed like we used
Mm.
to do.
Well, I mean, they talk to each other in video games. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
this same friend of mine was saying that when she sees her son, and he comes over and he's literally just playing with his mate on a computer game or something, and the kid lives just down the road, and these
Yeah.
kids have instead of actually interacting, and it's
Oh
having a
man.
really bad effect on society. I mean, all of
Uh-huh.
the so much of this cancel culture, woke narrative nonsense is just people being dragged along, and you just it's like they don't want to think for themselves, and so the people doing the thinking for them want them to move like a nice herd of sheep into a particular direction, and
Mhm.
they have these sheepdogs, which is like Mariana Spring, for example. She's a good sheepdog.
Oh, Mariana, my beautiful. Yeah, the little poodle face you gave her, or little poodle look you gave her, sorry, body is amazing. She just looks perfect. She's just so
she's
beautiful.
Yeah, she's just she's
She'll
so
come after me
memeable.
eventually. You know, she'll her or her the one who follows her. They're gonna have to come after me. The BBC, me and the BBC have already had multiple behind the scenes, backwards and forwards about different things, and I've never agreed to work with them, and always said that I don't trust them at all, and being like, and they've always been trying to get in somewhere because they can't write a story about me. Because if they write a story about me, then everybody will find out about my work, and that's a no-no. So it's gotta be like, at least with Russell Brand, if they like do a piece on him, then everybody will look at him wanking off a homeless guy in a toilet or peeing himself in public, and they'll go, "Oh yeah, that confirms that he's a wanker." You know, with me, it's like they have to come to terms with the fact that Schwab's dad helped like the Nazis try and gain the atomic bomb, and that's a little bit more awkward and precarious.
Yeah, you don't.
Yeah.
They can't have any truth bombs.
But I love this. I love that we have to have these battles because I take I'm that means I have free reign to have a go at the BBC. It
Mm.
means that I can do I can have a go at them, and they shouldn't be able to have a go back because they're constrained by their own like evil sort of ways. But
Yeah,
that'll only last so long. Eventually, they come after everybody, and I think one of the signs, the like the woke culture stuff, part of it is like the breakdown of the mainstream media means the mainstream media is pumping out this sort of stuff. And another thing, I I've been thinking about this a lot recently. And I've been looking and studying, and I said it in a news pasty the other day, in one of the last ones that was out. You know, traditional values in the east of Europe and Russia has always been a massive thing. You know, traditional Christian values. If you're from Hungary, Poland, Slovakia, any of those sort of areas and beyond, then you probably agree with traditional Christian values, and you want to keep things
Mm,
in that way. Woke
yeah,
culture is something else, and it's just not going to work over there. It's just going to cause a divide, and it doesn't even work over here. So it doesn't even make any sense because it just becomes with a
yeah.
load of people. It's got to be to destabilize your own population to cause problems. You go on.
No, I was just going to say everything they're doing is about destabilizing it. They're trying to destabilize people's minds with the constant fear narrative and the propaganda and jumping from one issue to the next, and everyone's confused about. I mean, they've even got people confused about what's a man and what's a woman. They have people confused about social interactions where you have to somehow, to be a polite person, you have to think about what some person's pronouns are,
Mhm.
and you have to twist language around by referring to an individual person as they or them, which is what you call more than one person. And every one of these interest groups has to be the most important. I mean, I'm not sure if you saw in the week, there was one of these large people influencers, I don't know what the politically correct term for them is, who'd set out a list of demands to airlines so that people that were too fat felt more included by giving them free seats and all of this free stuff. And it's just created this society of narcissistic,
Mhm.
unpleasant people.
Mhm. No, it has. It's created a load of people who are basically gonna continue to try and put their agenda forward until basically they get crushed.
Mm,
And this is, I mean, it's really easy to send a vanguard that's completely and utterly useless, so that everybody's watching that vanguard for before the actual battle commences, and you get your real fighters involved. And this is I I feel somewhat sorry for a lot of people who've been caught up in this. I feel that there's a lot of genteel characters. Gender itself is a complicated thing. Understanding how effeminate a scale of a spectrum of man can be, and how masculine the spectrum of woman can be, is just like, it's mind-boggling. I've met people who completely go against all gender norms in every different type of way. So there's like so many elements of it where I'm completely sympathetic with loads of different things. It's just this standard, unbreakable things that you just, women's safe spaces, the ability to suddenly like change reality as we know it, just not only logical, philosophical sort of things, but actual physical reality, to suddenly start naming things that aren't something else.
mm.
Those things are the true problem. That's what's Our society is sick with definitions, I think.
Yeah, it's no, I agree with you 100%. It's so Orwellian. I can't believe we have generations and generations of people that have read Orwell and learned absolutely nothing
I
whatsoever.
know.
And then you've got another section that decided to turn Brave New World 1984 into training manuals. And I agree with you. The thing that really disturbs me about particularly the trans agenda is that they they do the opposite of what they say. They say be kind, and then they do really unpleasant things
Mm.
to anyone who disagrees with them. And I think, for example, and I agree with you about having sympathy for kids, I mean, trying to grow up as a teenager, I found it difficult enough back in the 80s and 90s when I went through my teenage period, and that was hard enough. I can't even imagine doing it with social media and all of the nonsense that they've got now, and also all of the teacher training manuals that are supposedly affirming people. And I think it's good to, I mean, it's good to affirm someone, but you don't. It's like if someone, if a young girl comes to you and says and expresses an issue about being female, surely the correct approach is to try and listen to them and understand what it is about themselves that they're so unhappy with that they feel like they're born into the wrong body, instead of saying, right, well, we can attach a couple of bits and we can give you some pills, and yeah, we don't really know what those pills
Yeah.
are going to do long term because we haven't really
No.
tested it, but we can help you out. It's crazy.
I know what makes me cringe there. As soon as you say, "Oh, we can cut things and we can," it's the medical intervention
Hmm.
part. That's the point where it's like, wow, okay, yeah, we're stepping over boundaries that lead to extremely bad places. And when you're saying the Brave New World as a training manual or as a guide, I did the work on Herman Kahn and the year 2000, and basically them mapping out all the technologies that were going to come in the future. And then instead of being like Herman Kahn was saying, hey, slow down, we're gonna come up to fundamentally the hardest point in human civilization that could end in us dying extremely easy. Don't go into it quickly. And it's just become a training guide of it's just become a tick sheet. It's just become a checklist to get to transhumanism for a load of people who uh, uh, I want to say tropical, tropical.
Mm.
Um, they're stuck in this belief that they're going to be able to live forever and be able to do all of these things, and it's just such a human experience. Okay, I gotta ask quite. We gotta because that I mean that's good talking. But I mean we're going to talk about a couple of subjects today, and I think I'd
Mm.
like. I'd like for other people as well, because you're saying you grew up in the 80s and 90s, so you basically seen you're a bit older than me, so you've seen basically the same sort of things, but just a little bit advanced on. So when did the whole thing start to like? Were you like I was when you were young, getting fed BBC and believing it to as most of the extent? And did you come out of that paradigm? When did you get to the point that you are now? When was the breaking point?
Well, I've always I was brought up in Africa until I was 11, which shaped my younger years very much. And for us, we had the BBC World Service, which back in the day, the and even my father used to admit this, that the World Service's news about the UK itself was mostly just propaganda government garbage, but their news internationally was always really good.
Mhm.
And I'm sure that there was still it was when there was the kind of people like John Pilger, in terms of we're talking journalists that would actually go out to the war zone. I mean, you look at some of the really significant correspondence from the Vietnam War. I mean, Pilger is a good example
Oh,
because
it's
he's
interesting.
still going, and I don't necessarily agree with everything he says, particularly since the whole COVID thing. But I respect his I respect his journalistic integrity in the same way that I respect your journalistic integrity, and the research and actually trying to find some sort of semblance about what's actually going on and not just kowtowing to um, like moneyed interests and all of the assorted douchebags that are trying to control the world.
Hmm.
And yeah, so you wanted to start off. Well, the thing with I've been I've seen it go from being able to smoke on airplanes and being in Zambian airport security with a security guard rifling through suitcases. I remember because we used to fly after my parents split up, we'd fly out to Zambia every year to see my dad. And there was one year that a UTA flight exploded over the Sahara.
Oh wow, yeah.
And we actually flew UTA. We were on that. I'm not sure if it was that exact route, but we basically fly from Paris to usually somewhere like Cameroon or one of the West African colonies, and then from down there down to Zambia. And the plane would then go on to Malawi as well. And yeah, so we've done all sorts. I mean, we got to Zambia one year, and there was a riots, and there was a curfew, and my dad had to hustle us out of the airport really quickly. So back then,
Wow, yeah.
I mean, my dad
What
always
year
used.
was this, or what year around was this? Do you know? Do
Oh,
you remember?
that was the. It would have been about. It was the late 80s. It would have
Hmm.
been about
There's
80.
it's a lot of stories from Africa during this period that I've
Mm.
got from different people. Like over the 10-year period, is like getting out of the country when everything's falling apart. You know, in different countries. The same. I've got stories of Gabon and stuff. I mean, these places were relatively unstable then, and probably haven't changed too much today.
Well,
Go on,
Zambia
sorry.
itself is no, it's fine. I mean, Zambia. We lived in Nigeria and Malawi as well, but Zambia is the bit that I remember the most. And we were actually incredibly lucky because Zambia is one of the most peaceful, stable countries in Africa. They've never,
Mm.
even their war for independence is it's more of a really large protest than
Yeah.
necessarily a war. I mean, there was a lot of. I don't want to belittle anything that happened or any of the freedom fighters or people like Kaunda and stuff. And I actually met Kenneth Kaunda once or twice because of my dad, which it was fascinating. But I mean, Africa's it's an unbelievably fascinating place. But the other thing that I've seen is the birth of the internet as well, because I've been working on the web pretty much since there was a web. I mean, it was the early 90s that Tim Berners-Lee created uh, hypertext
Yeah,
and
announced it on Usenet in 1991.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it was 1995 that I first started working on the internet.
Wow. Yeah.
And so yeah, I'm the original one of the original internet dinosaurs. Well, the web, because the internet itself had been around for a lot longer. And the way that that's changed and the effect, the impact that that's had on society is phenomenal
Yeah.
I mean, in so many ways. But it's now it went from just being a bunch of hackers and we had an etiquette and people didn't send spam emails and stuff like that. And now you have an email account, you sign up for a few companies, and boom, suddenly your whole mailbox is just filled with
Mhm.
untold spam, and it's completely it's I sometimes wonder whether spam wasn't used as a way of making email less important, because this idea to send instant messages, if there was no spam and it was just people communicating, you wouldn't need. I
Dangerous.
mean, this is why messaging platforms were invented,
Mhm.
because
Yeah.
email itself is instant, but the spam is just craziness.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
I go on.
no, 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 I was just going to say. I mean, I've which part of the last 30, 40 years do you want to focus in on? Because I mean, Christ, I remember watching the Berlin Wall come down. And
Yeah. Yeah.
I did
Well, I
international relations at university as well, so I've always had an interest in all of this stuff.
first when we go to I find it really interesting, like when the journalistic integrity kind of started to break apart properly in the mainstream. And when you were talking about Vietnam War and Belgium, and I'm thinking about Max Frankel, who won a Pulitzer Prize, I think in about 1973 or 74 for well, it got to be 74, I reckon, for Nixon's visit to China. And a couple of years before, I think Seymour Hersh had won for his coverage in Vietnam. And both those guys I see as narrative setters and part working and adopted by the establishment during that period. Max Frankel joined the German Marshall Fund, and of course Seymour Hersh kind of continued the essence of explaining, like like expanded versions of mutually assured destruction and Kissinger's sort of war, like limited warfare. So it kind of like continued teaching the masses about these very important things. I kind of think that these people are put in place, and everybody, like when the Nord Stream thing happened, everybody was like, look, someone with journalistic integrity like Seymour Hersh, and that's exactly the person you want to have put up there at that point, being someone people will believe. So I'm always suspicious of nearly all pressmen nowadays, of any journalist, from the off. And I'm a journalist, so it's a really bad thing to be in, a really bad place to be in. But I'm automatically like got to check over who they were associated with, who they were aligned with before, because so much looks like journalistic integrity, but turns out to be something else. And talking about where we want to talk about, because I find the Berlin. I first when you were talking about the internet, of course, I did a lot of research on Usenet, the precursor kind of to the internet, which was based in mainly in America, with like universities and public institutions communicating with between each other. Now they got round the spam thing by everybody had to use their own identifier, their own name, their own email address from their institution that they were representing. And so that means that number one, there was records kept of everything that was being exchanged, which is terrible for all the people involved, and soon they had to destroy those databases. But it stopped spam. And of course, email takes away that, but we'd have to like be in a system where we do give our identity away if we wanted to avoid it. I think that's the conclusion it's come to.
Yeah, I mean, every single because as part of my job, one of the things that I build is mass email systems for clients. So client can they have a database of their members. They can go to a special web page and they fill their details in, press a button, and it sends all that they use as an email. And trying to get those emails through to users is just gets more and more complicated every year. And they've added new layers of different checking systems, and there's stuff that you do in a domain record, and there's like special keys called DKIM which you add to emails. It doesn't stop the spam, but then it's also a lot of it doesn't class as spam, because a lot of the what you and I have our inboxes filled up with is actually where you've had to sign up for a particular thing, and they've
Semi-spam,
yeah, and they've ended
pseudo spam.
yeah, absolutely. And there's just too much of it, and so this is now why when you're on social media. But if you look at Facebook, it's going the same way, because it's just adverts and the same. I mean, I have a verified Twitter account, so I think I might see less adverts than the not unverified users. But Twitter itself, even for us dastardly blue ticks, it's still filled with more and more and more adverts, which is what happens when you hire someone from advertising to be your CEO. Mr. Freedom of Speech, not freedom of reach, and Mr. and Mrs. Lawful but awful. I mean, it's craziness, and I mean, I am grateful to Elon Musk for buying Twitter and reinstating my account and connecting me with all the people out there that I'm fans of, and that I enjoy interacting with and get lots of good information from, like you, for example. And it's kind of but it's so arbitrary, because you know that just flick of the switch and you can be gone again.
The masters can be against you all of a sudden, and that's what they are. They're definite masters. We have no
Absolutely.
control over these things, and then suddenly the wind changes just for a second.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, there are still people that are persona non grata. I mean, Tommy Robinson, for example, who I had the establishment view of him as a far right, racist, scary bigot person. And then I saw, who was it that interviewed him? I think it might have been someone like Majid Nawaz, or one of these one of the more well known of the influencery, truthery type I don't like the word truther. I think it's silly, but
Yeah, yeah.
those on this side of the fence who like to think for themselves and do their own research. Um, and I came away with a completely different view of the man. He came across as extremely reasonable, extremely nice, extremely like the sort of person that you think, yeah, that's a good dad that takes care of his family. Which
Yeah.
I'm not a father. And I don't even have a wife. I just had a succession of bad relationships. But that's I'm not going to go into that one. But it's still I
What's
have
that? It's that
respect.
I can hear a choir. Oh,
Yeah,
anyway,
but
go
I
on.
mean, I
Sorry.
have I have respect for the husbands and the fathers out there
Mm,
who are providing for their families and doing the best for their kids, doing the best for their wives, and I have masses of respect for that. And it's some things are important, some things aren't, and the society that we live in is sending things in completely the wrong direction.
mhm,
It's what you going back to what you were saying earlier about the whole trans agenda and how we're having to invert so much and twist things around to make it make sense. And it's all being done deliberately. It's and they're using that distraction and in the background, to quote the War of the Worlds, they're letting their plans against us.
mhm.
And slowly
Yeah.
but surely they made their plans against us. That famous quote. And it's yeah. And then
So,
it's like one of the reasons I like the stuff that you do is because you go properly deep into subjects. I mean, I'm good at skirting over things because I don't have a huge amount of time to devote to lots of in-depth research. And I get bored quite quickly. So I like to go from topic to topic and I like knowing a bit about a lot of different things. But reading some of the stuff that you've produced over the years, I've learned masses and masses and masses of detail, and I like the way that you go into family trees and genealogies. We had this conversation when we hooked up here, um, because when you actually look back on, if you go back through someone's family, that's where you see their influences come from and the sorts of people they are. If you have a family of chefs, like Neapolitan pizza chefs, for example, there's a place not too far from mine that does the most fabulous proper Italian pizzas, and it's a family from Napoli, and it's like it goes back generations of them all making pizza, and they're all happy, and they. I mean, that's very different from someone like Bill Gates, who's
yeah, yeah.
just this long line of um eugenicist megalomaniacal autocratic greedy rich wannabe tyrants. I mean,
In control of their arena, their family, their area, and trying to push their influence and their agenda upon everyone else since 1370 something. That's it's. I've started to realize that I went past being like a conspiracy theory writer or anything like that, or a conspiracy theorist, all this, and I went into the realms of historian, and then I stayed around in the realms of historian for quite a while. And it makes it really awkward. It makes it really awkward because the truth is really, if you want to know everything that happened in history, it's going to take you your entire life. If you know certain things, you see where the joins are, and the rest of the illusion falls away. So that's what we're all got to be doing. That's what you're doing as well as what I'm doing. As what a lot of people out there. And I agree with the problem with using the term truther. I used it today. I was talking to someone about 9/11, and we were having this conversation, and he actually doesn't believe in the official narrative, yet still sees the question of official narrative as conspiracy theory. But if you already know a conspiracy exists, you're just not sure which conspiracy it is. It doesn't make any sense. Getting back to one, because God, we there's a lot. I like this conversation.
yeah,
We're
no, it's
covering
good.
a lot there. um
I like going from topic to topic.
Yeah, and it all seems to link up. So you were saying, how far you can go back, because I mean, for me, when I was watching David Hasselhoff performing in Berlin, and there being all the celebrations, I was pretty young, and I was watching the first Iraq War and stuff. I was pretty young. And all of that time, I believed what was going on. Rwanda, I believed. Bosnia, I believed whatever the BBC had fed me, and establishment reporters. And it was probably September the 11th that broke me out of that. Were you out of it before September the 11th?
Um, I've been fascinated by geopolitics, particularly political assassinations, ever since Indira Gandhi's murder. Not that I was a researcher, and I did believe the official explanations. And I think um, when I first watched Oliver Stone's JFK movie, those sorts of things kind of softened my mind up enough that when 9/11 happened, that
Mm-hmm.
was when I still remember very distinctly not just what was happening on 9/11, but I still have a very clear memory of how it was a Friday afternoon at work, and it was about 4 o'clock, and I'd done everything for the week. I basically had an hour of time that I didn't have anything to do. So, and it had been bugging at me, and I sat down and I typed into, I can't remember what search engine it was. Was it Google? I think it was primitive Google back then. In fact, I think that was just when it was starting. And it was the most impressive search engine that I'd ever used up until that point. And I literally used all of them. I can just a small tangent. I mean, the very first version of Yahoo, I used that. Um, and I typed what really happened on 9/11 into a search engine, and I found a website called whatreallyhappened.com, which is probably not the same result that you'll get for a search like that today. And to plug Mike Rivera, whatreallyhappened.com, he's a great aggregator. I mean, he has his own views, but he's good at pulling in lots of different news sources from um, local places. It's like if he's reporting on something that's happening in, say, Israel, like at the moment, he will be pasting in links to Ynet News and Al Jazeera and news sources that are actually in the area. So you can get it's a great site for getting alternative views about stuff, but also what's happening, what people are saying on the ground. Which I think you just need to, as you know, you need to be constantly trying to look at all of the information sources that you've got. And can I confirm this? Is anyone else saying this? Does this feel right? Does this track with my previous experience? Does this seem like it? If I was a detective, I'd say who benefits from this? And all these different techniques that we all have to use constantly to try and figure out what the hell's going on in this world, and to try and make sense of it, which is basically where my research started with 9/11. So yeah, I'd say 9/11, but I like to think I always take it back to JFK, because the Kennedy assassination is something that, like I said, political assassinations, Kennedy, Indira Gandhi, um, and far too many others. We could just sit here for an hour reeling off the list. But it's also interesting when you go back over events like that and you look at the rabbit holes surrounding the assassination of Indira Gandhi, and then you also factor in what about
Well,
the deep state?
I don't know much about the assassination of Indira Gandhi, and I probably should, because I've skirted by that subject over and over again, but I've never looked for, because I mean, she came up in Pottinger, It's supporting supremacy with Gloria Steinem, befriending her when she was a young CIA recruit, just recruited straight out of India. Like, oh, I just met her, I just happened to meet her. So there's obviously they're getting the agency in there straight away. So you know, that's not something that I know much about. So
Well, there's
I
connections. I mean, I don't know a massive amount about it. I remember, well, I remember being probably about 7 or 8 and being absolutely fascinated to hear that this important Indian lady had been assassinated.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
I think it was probably the very first time I'd ever heard the word assassinate. It's kind of a
Mm.
cool word as well when you're a kid.
Yeah, yeah,
But then my dad was really into Time magazine, which obviously it's not, I wouldn't describe as a reliable source of information now.
no, I'd describe it as super gay. But anyway, go on. I'm a relic, so who knows
No,
if
I
that's the
yeah,
right
no,
term.
I agree, but they'd done this infographic of this whole area around where she was murdered, and I'm sure that there was more to it than that, and there was absolutely no alternative information in this article. I just remember as a child being fascinated by this whole notion that someone would get killed for being having a different opinion to it was
Mm.
just it was a formative little moment for me. And then finding out about Kennedy and Oliver Stone's really, I mean,
Amazing. That's one of the. I
it's
mean, it shook me when I was young as well. Just left me.
yeah,
I watched it over and over again, and it's a long bloody film. Well, it's like 3.5 hours or something. It's like almost Seven Samurai sort of level. I don't know. I can't
yeah,
remember.
and it's and I've again, I mean, I've got it. I still have it, and I still go back and watch it. And I'm not sure
Yeah,
if you
yeah.
watched the
It's
update.
making me wanna. It's making me. What do you mean? There's
It
an
didn't.
update?
Yeah, no, he did a. Let me just pull this. Let me just find it in my browser, and I'll pull it up for you. He did a. It wasn't the movie, but it was almost like a review. Um, Not a review. What's the right word for it? He kind of. Hang on a minute. Let me just look. Yeah, it's called JFK Revisited, and it
Ooh.
was 2021. Um, yeah, JFK Revisited through the Looking Glass, and he sort of goes back to talk to some of the actors, and he just sort of looks at aspects of the story. It's if you're a fan of the movie, you should definitely watch this. I'll send you the link
Mm-hmm.
because it's yeah, it's interesting, and that for me was I was just about to go into university.
Mm-hmm.
And then for ages, I wasn't really that interested in I mean, I've always been interested in what's going on in the world, and I've always assumed that there's more stuff happening than we know about. I was a massive X-Files fan. And when the internet first came out, I was one of the people that was out there looking for looking for different alternative bits of information, including the secret KFC recipe. Um,
Sorry, no, that tickled me pink. Yes.
no, that was a thing. It was people,
Yeah.
and but that was when the internet was um, much smaller and
Mm-hmm.
less full on, certainly less pervasive. I mean, back then I was a computer nerd, and over the years of over the last say 30 years, I've gone from being a computer nerd to an IT professional.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the technology has gone from the very first web browser I used, which was Netscape 0.9n, and it didn't support background images or tables or forms or anything like that. No, it could do forms, but very, very primitive. And you look at now, I mean, I've been working with OpenAI at work and doing a huge amount of AI stuff. I mean,
Oh
my
God.
last, I actually did a coding project with AI, both
Mm-hmm.
because at the time I'd had a late night conversation with a friend, and we'd just gotten into a groove, and we'd been chatting until about 1 or 2 in the morning, and I'd had far too much wine to drink, and I woke up on Friday, and I was just not in the mood for anything. So I thought to myself, right, I'm going to see if I can get AI to help me code this thing that I was trying to build. And it took me about half a day going backwards and forwards with it, multiple iterations and um, getting it to debug itself. And I ended up with a script which I ran um, as part of the project for a client that I was working on. And it worked beautifully. And it was a
Hmm.
really, really nicely written piece of code. So, but AI is not going to take over the world.
Yep.
But that's probably, we've now jumped from September the 11th to AI. So let's just, I'm happy to,
Just before, let's see if this works. I take it it's this, yeah?
yeah,
JFK
that's the one.
visit. Yeah, okay. Well, this looks like an interesting one. I also mentioned that Corey Hughes' book is out. You can read the first chapter on newspace.com, and he looks deep into this. Of course, I mean, completely and utterly enthralling and intriguing look at that, like that conspiracy is one of the ones that's really fueled the modern day truth movement. The idea of conspiracy theory, all of it has really been was catalyzed in that moment,
But they've
and
been, I mean,
has
they've been using the same playbook. If you
yeah.
look at the techniques over the years, they're so boring. I'm going to say this officially to the CIA. Boring, 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 boring.
Don't make him do anything too exciting.
No,
To
but
be honest, I'm very suspicious about them. Those people, those three-letter people, and I've had enough of them, to be perfectly honest. So, my message to them is just stop, will you? Just
yeah,
please
no,
stop.
stop.
That's it.
But
Just
it's
stop.
the thing is that once you see, this is why I find it so difficult that even people who are more aware of this stuff instead of the kind of sleeping masses, um, it's yeah, I just, you see the same playbooks. And the thing that got me, it was actually when the whole Rona started and when they started accusing people of being anti-vaxxers and they started really clamping down on people. You know what it reminded me of? It reminded me of the anti the pro-Israel people during 9/11, because there was all sorts of threads. There are, as you know, there are all sorts of different threads that come out of 9/11, and there's
Mhm,
quite a few of them, like Dancing Israelis, which you look at and it's a kind of things that make you go
mhm.
and
Echoed Barack nearly straight as soon as it happened, coming out and saying, "Yes, this was done by Osama bin Laden." Bloody, bloody.
yeah,
No, it's
and
ridiculous.
Bibi Netanyahu saying, "Oh, this is going to be really good for Israel." Oh yeah, no, it's really bad for America. Sorry, really, really bad, really tragic, really, really bad. Um,
Terrible.
and there's too much. This is, but I was trying to wake people up after 9/11. The number of people that I tried to have conversations with, and to this day, they are still locked into the official narrative, and they're the ones getting jabbed,
Mm-hmm.
despite me saying, "Look, I don't trust this. I'm not doing it." No, and it was. I mean, I came out of it a lot better than a lot of people I know. I mean, there's a lot of people whose lives have been pretty much destroyed by it. Not counting the ones who trustingly took the thing and ended up with all sorts of bad things. And my heart goes out to every single one of those, more than anyone else, because they're the ones that thought they were doing the right thing and got shafted for it, and now are being completely ignored.
Yeah, of
And
course.
it's one of the things I will always do on Twitter is I will always try and amplify any voices of those who have been injured. Um, and yeah, it's really sad.
Stings of 9/11 firefighters and or every
Absolutely.
single like sort of heroic moment that where they step up in the face of adversity and it turns out it's a major psyop, and
Yeah.
it's all they're just going to be used a little pawn, a public pawn in the face. And
And even people who, even this, and there's so many going right the way, if we're talking about JFK, going right the way back to the Kennedy assassination. People like Mary Pinchot Meyer, who was She was the wife of Cordmeyer, who was heavily involved he was in the CIA.
Oh,
And
yeah, he
so
was
his
pretty
his
important.
circle, yeah, and so I mean his circle included people like James Jesus Angleton and
I'd
some of
love to look
those.
more into Cordmeyer. Sorry, I just say when
Well,
you
it's
mentioned his name, he's
that
just
that one,
he's extraordinary. He's extraordinary.
Mary Meyer. There's an interesting book. It's called Mary's Mosaic about Mary Meyer because she was actually found dead on a towpath in Washington. Um, as which and she basically she had a diary. She was one of Kennedy's mistresses.
Is a towpath a little bit smaller than a footpath?
Well, no, it's along a canal.
Hmm?
The,
Yeah,
the
yeah,
you
yeah,
know
yeah,
back
yeah.
in the day where they
I
they
just
had
like the idea toe and foot. That's all. Anyway.
right. Sorry,
Yeah, yeah. I could
it's
help
that
it.
Welsh humor coming out again.
Yeah, it
But
is.
I mean, she's a fascinating character. I'd be really interested to see anything because she's connected into that whole level of the CIA, which was involved in what happened. And she, being Kennedy's mistress, reportedly never believed the official explanation, and through her contacts was able to gather plenty of information and find things out. And yeah, she was taken out. It was classic.
Yeah, that's dangerous as hell. I mean, back then,
Yeah,
pre probably, I would say probably about pre-millennium. I think after the millennium, they really cooled down on their assassinations. They started to just like spies started to call each other out, and I think they realized warfare was changing because of the online world. So it's no longer going
yeah.
to be. You can destroy someone and their credibility if you're in control of the media too, and that wasn't the same. They didn't have the same kind of control back then. So I mean, it's just such a different world, and
It, yeah.
yeah, the spies were
Media
so
wasn't
good.
so concentrated either. I mean, certainly if you look back in the 60s, the amount of independent, certainly in the United States, I mean, not so much in the UK, but in the US, there was a lot of independent TV stations and radio stations and
Mm.
newspapers. And over the years, it's been consolidated down into fewer and fewer. So actually, I think it might have been you. I listened to a podcast of yours where you were talking about the Gutenberg press. Does that sound like something
Mm.
that you've talked about? Was that,
I I've
I
once or
think,
twice mentioned the Gutenberg press, but it depends what it's about. But
well,
probably
no,
not.
in the context of information, how they when the Gutenberg first came out with his press, and suddenly the printed word was no longer just the domain of monks and learned people. Um,
Mhm.
Suddenly you had the Christian Reformation, and you have
Yeah,
all of this
Tyndale.
stuff that happens as a result of um, the printing press. And now, if we fast forward that to the internet coming out, it was the same process. The same thing happened where initially everybody's got a web page and everybody can find everybody
Yeah,
else, and
yeah.
there was no Google, there was no gatekeepers, there was no algorithms, there was no shadow banning or anything like that. Everybody had an equal voice.
Everybody had their
Um,
balls
yeah,
clearly on display.
absolutely. And then everybody's then over the years we were all funneled into these platforms to the point where now there are people that think that Facebook is the internet because it comes on their phone and it's their first gateway into the internet, and so they think Facebook is the internet. It actually reminds me of a really funny. This happened probably about 15 years ago, and with clients and also friends and people, I try and be helpful technically because there's a lot of people out there that don't like the technology, don't understand it, they're forced to use it, and they just are just they don't want to do it. And so I offer to help, and I do that particularly with clients, even if it's not necessarily related to whatever we're working on. And one of the we just had this meeting in the office. It was a prospective client, and we were just getting friendly. Um, and we had this big screen, and we were looking at web pages and prospective designs for their site and stuff like that. And at the end of the meeting, he said, "Ed, I hope you don't mind, but I'd like to ask you a technical question. Um, what's the difference between Firefox and the internet?" And I was like, because when he says the internet, he means Internet Explorer, which is the default browser
Mhm.
that he had on his system.
Mhm.
And it's one of those moments where I don't want to burst out laughing, and I just kind of smile and gave him a, oh, it's just a different web browser. They're just different ways of accessing the internet. And
Mhm.
it's that, yeah, it's that sort of just
People
funny
don't
story.
people don't have the ability yet to understand that we're or the now that's happening again. So what you're talking about, I have talked about like especially within religion, the sort of like ability to have access to Bibles all of a sudden, and Tyndall writing the Bible and then going out and being able to press it and smuggle it into the country and around to different people, and suddenly they're not having to rely on someone who only speaks Latin to tell them what's in a book. You know, it's you've got access to these things yourself. It changes everything. And when the internet come around, changed everything again. The access again, people have access to this information, and that was powerful, man. I mean, it's kind of like this personal journey, isn't it? The internet for us who lived when it was just is like dial-up modems. You'd
Oh
and then
yeah, no,
you
I
get the
remember those.
slowest internet around. If you want to download a song, it's probably going to take you all day. But still, these new things were going boom, 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 boom. They were all coming up, peer-to-peer platforms, different ways to browse the internet, archiving internet pages, things that suddenly, like, you know, they knew where it was going very early on, and we were just passengers on that ride. And for me, like, the start of the internet was just astounding. It was just so exciting, but you couldn't work out what you'd type into it. Now it just seems like a constant flow of typing things in. You're constantly like the next thing, the next thing, the next thing. Back at the
Yeah,
start, it was like, oh, you can ask this thing anything. What do you possibly ask it? And you're probably going to end up going down the realm of conspiracy theory because it was so interesting. All of these things were so interesting. So when was on to like 9/11? I mean, I for me, I remember when you were talking earlier on. I remember one person I worked with. I'll say his first name, Chris. He was a lovely boy, bless him. He was when 9/11 happened. Literally on a year anniversary of 9/11, I started working in Dixon's XL. It was like a big electronics retailer. And there was this guy who worked there, Chris, who had started studying into 9/11. And within a couple of months, he was sending me some crazy messages. He had just, like, early on, right at the start of the internet, probably about 2003, 2000, late 2002, early 2003, he had gone off the edge of the conspiracy wormhole before there was any like net of information. You just like go down there back then and it was everything goes. So when you're talking about, like, this was wild west internet, you know.
mm. Well,
And
that's how
taking
it
a
was
little
at the
break,
start.
I've made a cup of tea. I used to work with a guy in Dixon's XL. I've tried to tell his story a few times already, but the computers keep crashing and the internet keeps going down. So I should tell it as quickly as I can, just in case they don't like me telling it. I knew a guy called Chris. He was a nice guy, you know, worked in Dixon's. It was a technology company. And he got into conspiracies around 2003, 2004, surrounding 9/11, and went down rabbit hole so deep that he came out the other side as a madman. And basically, later on, I saw him after not seeing him for a while because he was a bit of a madman. And he was like, yeah, I had to go through that. I had to come out the other side. And I think we all went through some sort of state of like distress. We're leaving the comfort zone here and we're entering into somewhere else, and it's somewhere really spicy. So I take it where was the point where you said, no way, this is obviously I'm on this side of the fence?
Um, when those two towers came down, that for me was the before and after moment. In terms of what you described, your friend going through, um, there's a very good book that I came across around about the exact time I needed to read it, which was Robert Anton Wilson's Prometheus Rising. And anybody out there who is just getting started in this whole conspiracy wonderland needs to investigate, needs to read Prometheus Rising. And in that book, um, uh, Wilson describes it as Chapel Perilous, is that place that you enter when you start down the conspiracy rabbit hole. And in Chapel Perilous, up is down, black is white, nothing makes sense. You have to look at everything five different ways. And sometimes you can look at it from five different ways and you see five different, completely different stories. People that you thought you could trust, you can't trust. People that you don't think you can trust, you can trust. And he said that you come out of Chapel Perilous either completely agnostic or completely insane. And that you have to always maintain a grip on your own sense of self, your own sanity, your own you have to have anchors into not into normality, because you soon realize that what you thought was the normal world is just a massive construct. It's like being in the bloody Matrix. And it's crazy how these things work out, because people talk about predictive programming, and then the Matrix came out in the late 90s, and it was one of those films that didn't do very well at the box office but did brilliantly on DVD. And
It did brilliantly on being sold out of a locker in work on VHS, grainy VHS. That's what I tell you, I can promise you.
and I mean, I watched that film three times back to back the first time, and I just watched it and I was just blown away by every aspect of not the. I mean, the film itself was good, but it was the story behind the film, and the it was like it resonated like Big Ben going off next to my bedroom window. And you just it's I think stuff like that actually prepared me for what happened on 9/11. And also being really into construction videos. There's this old series on Discovery of this company that goes around the world taking down really difficult buildings, and the amount of effort that they have to put into getting a building to go boom straight down.
Yeah,
Now,
it's insane.
I mean, one of my recent in the last, it's interesting thing about 9/11, just following on from that little bit, because this is relevant, is that even after 20 years, I'm still coming across really interesting new pieces of information about 9/11, which previously I would have ignored. It's like I sort of skirted around the directed energy weapons thing 10 years ago, 15 years ago, when I was researching 9/11. And it just seemed a bit too fantastical to me. And it was too much like sci-fi, a little bit too kooky, even for me. But ever since the big Rona, from my perspective, all bets are off as far as all of those theories, and that includes David Icke and the reptilians and all of that stuff. There's a few things that I haven't been sold on.
Okay, if you don't, I'm coming to terms with the fact that if you don't have all options on the table, however much you think lacking a probability, then you're not doing it right. We got to straw man and strong man everything. We got to go through everything one by one, because obviously we're only getting little bits of it, and we shouldn't just be happy with a little bit. And this is what the problem I have with the other side of censorship. What we're doing is sorting through what needs to be sorted through.
Absolutely. And I mean, my thing with the that was another that I mean, more recently, that's one of the big red flags for me, was all the censorship. Because I'm a child of the end of the Cold War. I remember, as I said before, I remember watching the Berlin Wall coming down, and there was that Scorpions concert. They did Winds of Change. And to this day, if when the Scorpions, when that song comes on, or I even think about it, I'll start choking up. And it's one of the fastest ways to have tears streaming down my face, because that song, that moment, the hope. It was also because, I mean, I was late teens as well, so it was there was this. Oh my God, it's the end of the Cold War. Peace is broken out. All of the Iron Curtains going down. All of these Eastern and Western European, because people have to remember that up until the early 90s, there were people in East and West Germany, families who'd been split by the Cold War, and forgive me, it chokes me up just thinking about it now. It really does. It's one of those pivotal moments, and then you see afterwards what happens, and it has repercussions to this day because I remember all of the Reagan and Gorbachev meeting and the breakup of the Soviet Union and all of this other stuff that was happening and the assurances that were given to the Soviets about NATO going west and the amount of difficulty they had trying to reunify East and West Germany because the Soviets were completely petrified that it was going to end up being that they'd end up just having hostile forces on their borders, which is a legitimate concern as a country, especially a country that's had two
Especially when you
giant.
look at it now.
Yeah, well, especially when you look at history as well, because it's not just a country; it's a country that's had two massive, giant armies intent on taking over, and has credit to them, seen them both off. And I mean, people don't give the Russians enough credit for World War II because
Yeah,
people like to
they
think,
did
oh, we won World War
amazing.
II. No, we didn't. It was the Russians who died at Stalingrad.
The West who could only get their balls out eventually because of the massive, enormous kahunas on these guys over there who were moving like
Absolutely.
completely across the land, just taking territory after the biggest standoff in history.
Mm.
You know, just amazing. Yeah, I've got so much. I got loads of times for time for Russian culture, Russian people.
Me
I
too.
got so much time for them. I think they're really, really like they're
I mean,
of course.
Solzhenitsyn, Tchaikovsky, Dostoevsky. I mean, you can't to say that it's like well something that makes me very angry about the neocons, people like Victoria Newland and Jake Sullivan and people like that, is this view that they have of Russia just being a big petrol station,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
masquerading as a country. And I mean, I get called a Putin troll all the time on Twitter because I refuse to simply pick a side because everyone's telling me that I have to pick a side.
Mhm.
And I mean, for me, this is because I'm half English and half Dutch. And the minute that, as a guy, another guy finds that out, which football team do you support if England play Holland? So I don't watch football news. Don't do it. And I couldn't pick. I mean, asking me to say what do you prefer, England or Holland, and I'll probably retort with some sort of diatribe about the fact that all of this nationalistic bollocks is just completely pointless and destroying the world.
But it's base level. Those type of people trying to get people to make that sort of like statement is trying to coax them in to divisive rhetoric, knowing that it's divisive. I mean, that's what it is, and it's such a really like if you can say that to someone who's doing it at the time, they never do it again. And I think this is one of the things we've had all of the tools of just being able to say what somebody's doing taken away from us, and instead we're just looking at what they're doing rather than the reasons they're doing it, like what's
Yeah,
actually
but
behind.
people are constantly reacting as well.
Hmm.
They because the
Proper
other
verb
because
almost.
well, the system is trying to keep us off guard. They're trying to keep us off balance. So not off guard, on guard, and off balance, and always trying to figure out what's true and what isn't. And the yeah, you see things like the BBC and all of these people who supposedly are trustworthy and say they're trustworthy. The BBC spends an awful lot of time trying to convince everyone that they're trustworthy and
Hmm.
believable. And when you get to the censorship, this is where I started with the whole Berlin Wall thing. That censorship, as soon as someone's being censored, I automatically want to find out what they've got to say.
Yeah, I know. It's just it's so tempting, isn't it?
And to think that the world that I thought we were moving out of when the Berlin Wall came down actually seems to be going almost full circle, and we seem to be on the wrong side of the bloody wall this time.
And this is, yeah,
Um,
this is something very, but something I've been really pushing at recently is that we have found ourselves. It used to be like this cultural revolution over there in Russia was the thing that was the problem, but this cultural revolution over here in the West has become a problem for everybody, including the Russians. So, I mean, we have become the same as the Soviet Union was, split apart, rife for falling apart, an empire
mm,
falling apart, an
yeah,
empire falling apart.
well, it is. I mean, we are watching this civilizational change and the shift in power. And I'm not convinced about the BRICS, but I will say that I like the idea of a multipolar world much more than a unipolar world. And I
Yeah,
think
agreed.
that um, I don't necessarily. I have trust issues generally, certainly for the last 3 years.
Hmm.
In terms of what I'm hearing from official people, whether that's Putin or Biden or Xi or Sunak or whoever, um, I suspect that they're not giving us the whole truth. But when you see when you look at what they do instead of what they say, and on the one side you have these arrogant, fake smiling Western leaders like Sunak, who want to try and think he's everybody's friend and he's doing everything for everybody and he's working to sort the country out. Same with Starmer. And at the same time, their actions undermine their words all the time and they just
Yeah.
work on narrative. And the country's falling to bits. They can't fix the roads. There's constant shortages in supermarkets. Inflation's going through the roof. The healthcare system is basically non-existent now.
Hmm.
And then you look at somewhere like Russia, where the economy is basically booming. The sanctions have completely backfired, and they're only hurting us. Um, I just heard that the Germans are buying Russian liquefied natural gas, which they could be having
Yeah.
much more cheaply through the pipeline that was blown up. And
Oh.
it's just, but it's when you actually look at all of these different things, they're like links in a chain, and that chain stretches right the way back to the JFK assassination. Further back than that, just goes on and on, and there's events that are links in this chain.
What one of those events we're going to speak about is uh after the British version of 9/11, you know, the seven
Yeah.
seven bombing. And I know you know some things about that. And you know, for me, I like discussing these things out loud because I don't think they've been discussed enough. Especially like people's experiences, trying to understand what people went through, like is really hard. And I think it's like the 9/11 attacks was a collective hit on America, or perceived as that. That's how the 7/7 bombings were pushed in the UK. And I remember that I had moved out to France 3 days before. I had been on the underground. You know, I arrived in another country. I was about to start living in another country for the first time, and then these bombings happened, and it was just like I couldn't take my eyes off the screen. I was just, even though I knew that there was probably a load of this was probably an operation happening deep down. I know this. I know this to be so. It's obvious it doesn't taste right, doesn't smell right. 9/11, we've already seen what's happening there. It became fascinating to see how they display the drama to us, and that became what I remember of it being very like feeling distant, but feeling like it was something that was a really important part to what the story that they were creating of being British. So what was going on there? What was happening at the time that you can bring light onto?
Well, it's not 7/7 is a really interesting one because I was properly deep into my research by that point. I'd started on 9/11 and I'd gone back to Kennedy and I'd retraced older events and the internet was actually a much more useful resource than it is now because of the lack of Google trying to tell you what to bloody think. And I remember 7/7 happening. I was actually living in the same place, doing the same job. My life in external terms wasn't significantly different from how it is now, apart from wrinkles and more flab and life experiences. But I was very tuned in. And I was actually updating a blog at the time. And it was kind of, there was also sources like Prison Planet, which was Paul Joseph Watson, who's now, he's more kind of a YouTube commentator, but back then he was much more connected to Alex Jones and the conspiracy side of things and stuff like that. And I mean, he's a fantastic researcher back in the day. And I mean, a lot of his videos now are funny. Um, but yeah, anyway, so there's a whole load of stuff that he covered at the time. And it was because of 9/11, I was suspicious about 7/7 as soon as it happened. And as soon as the first reports of bombs going off in London happened, I was all over the news. And then came along Peter Power and Visor Consultants, who happened to be carrying out an exercise, basically doing exactly what ended up happening. And
Mhm.
somehow this guy was let onto local radio. And it's the thing, one of the common features of these big mass casualty events like 9/11 and 7/7 is that at the very, very beginning, in the first 2 or 3 hours, is when most of the pertinent information actually comes out in little
Mhm.
bits. But it's then it'll be on one news report and you never see it again.
Mhm.
And this Peter Power thing, that was very much what they tried to do with that. But by that point, we were just at the point where it was really quite easy to video stuff, and someone managed to get a copy of that footage. Um, and it's still, I mean, it's still available. People can go and find it on YouTube. And because of the FEMA drills in 9/11 the day before, on the 10th of September, um, the I was just looking for stuff. And if you think about the climate back then, this was just before the Iraq War as well. Um, and the whole country here was against, I mean, it was one of the biggest anti-war marches that has ever happened in London. Um, and it was basically the government completely ignored it and went along with Bush um, in that disastrous, now, as we know, illegal war.
Mhm.
And it was all bound up with that. They needed to keep the terrorism fear going.
Mhm.
That was part of it. They had to link the UK with the US. There was also the Atocha train bombing in Spain, which again, it connected mainland Europe into the whole terrorism thing. They followed they were very similar sorts of scripts. And I mean, there's so much about 7/7 itself, which didn't make sense, from the supposed bombers through interesting reports from various eyewitnesses who I remember hearing about at the time, who were saying that they were having to walk out of train carriages that had um, where the metal shark, the metal of the floor of the train carriage was actually pointed upwards, as if there'd been an explosion from underneath.
Mhm. Mhm.
Reports of people working on the buses, there were anonymous reports from bus drivers saying that the crew that normally worked on the CCTV systems on the buses, there was a different crew that came, and that they spent longer working on those buses than they would normally have spent on a bus. And oh yeah, the CCTV on that bus happened to be one of the few bus CCTV systems that wasn't working in the whole capital, which I mean, that is, but whenever it's amazing how we can be completely covered in CCTV, and anytime you actually need the bloody cameras, they're never working. It's the same with during um, Diana's crash, that the only CCTV cameras that weren't working in Paris on that day were the ones lining the bloody route of the.
Yeah. I find it quite sweet. I find it quite sweet that they leave so many breadcrumbs for us to find, because I mean that sort of stuff can be discounted by a lot of people, but some people will follow the next breadcrumb. And with 7-7, the want to create that feeling of impending doom. They were really good at it. They created it, but I was aware at the time that, oh, even though it's been created, they've created the thing that they're trying to scare us with. So a lot of these people may actually believe they're doing it for the same purpose that they want us to believe they're doing it. And so then it's really hard to work out who to have sympathy for or not, because they're both doing the thing. The one person, both things are true. There's a conspiracy to do a load of events to force policy elsewhere and force wars upon us, and then there's someone who believes in what they're doing something for God and for something else. There's two things are true simultaneously. It becomes so very confusing. But do you know anything about the bombers who were involved in 7-7? Were they?
They were basically just regular people, and
Yeah,
my
yeah.
my suspicion about them is that they were family men. There was one of them that had a new baby. None of their friends reported any kind of extremist tendencies or anything like that. And my pet theory is that they were actually part of the exercise,
Hmm.
that they were basically hired as Muslim-looking dudes, upstanding British citizens. Hey guys, do you want to earn some extra cash? I mean, like I said, one of the guys had a new family, for example, and if you're a new dad and you see an ad in the paper or maybe some local, maybe they're advertised in some, I don't know, a few chip shops somewhere in an area that has lots of Asians saying, I want to earn an extra bit of cash. Call this number. We need some volunteers to help us with
Hmm.
a homeland security exercise. Now that's what the Americans would say,
Hmm.
a home office, whatever. But they could have, yeah, and so those guys just essentially did what they were told. They were given rucksacks, which always for suicide bombers, um, especially if you're going to be on a packed commuter train in the morning rush hour on the London Underground, and you're carrying a bomb around in a rucksack, why wouldn't you have a vest on, for example? Because
Hmm.
you've got, apart from anything else, you've got much more risk that someone is accidentally going to bash it or something like that,
Hmm.
and you end up accidentally going off. Now, I mean, obviously, suicide bombers don't have to have suicide vests. We don't want to be a complete cliche about the whole thing,
No.
but there was something about that I always found a bit odd. Um, there was lots of things about it that I found really odd. The way that the bus route had been changed,
Hmm.
the guy that was on the bus, his whole behavior was really odd for someone that was actually trying to, because he didn't go and sit in the bus in the most crowded part of the bus as if he was a genuine terrorist bomber wanting to blow things up and kill people to make a religious statement. Um, he was actually in the least crowded part of the bus, as far away from everybody else as he could get
Hmm.
without not being on the bus.
So there's a chance that they didn't know that they were carrying anything explosive at all.
I'm not convinced they did. I'm not, I mean, and obviously all of this is speculation. I don't want to disrespect any of the people who died or any of the families or anything
Yeah,
like that.
yeah,
This is
yeah.
not about
I think searching for the truth and examining all our angles is fair to do, and that I hope that however emotional I feel, if the same thing happens to me or my loved ones, that people will do the same. That would be nice.
I would like to think so, but not everybody does. I remember probably about 3 or 4 months after it had all happened, having a family, well, not my family, but my ex's, a late girlfriend's family. She basically, we had a birthday party for someone, I think it was her mum, and one of her step brother's partner had been caught up. She'd been on one of the tube trains and had to walk out of the underground. And me being me at the time and being much less talented at restraining myself. I started going off on a spiel about how it was all a big conspiracy theory and stuff. And the look on her face, I learned a valuable lesson that day about
Hmm.
decorum and when to say things about conspiracy theories and when not to,
Yeah,
which is why particularly when I'm covering stuff like this, I think it's important to recognize that people died and people's lives were changed. And my search, as you said quite rightly, my search for the truth is about trying to give their deaths a reason and a meaning that so that they didn't die for nothing. If they died for a lie and they died for a war, I think that if you could ask them in the afterlife whether they would be happy having their deaths used to start a war which killed hundreds of thousands of people, or whether they would want the truth to be exposed despite the fact that it might upset their family. I think when you put the question in that sort of way, I think it's right to explore the truth. I
yeah.
just think it's important to do it respectfully as well.
I hope I think that if you ask anyone in the afterlife, they're likely to say, "Forgive everything. I don't care." But we are in a place where we don't know what comes beyond, but we also know we need to keep the rule of law here, and so there is a lot of these actions are taken because there's some people who think this is the best way to keep the rule of law, scaring people, coercing people, manipulating people, sacrificing people for some higher cause. And then in doing that, you save more lives over here that you can't completely prove that you have actually saved anybody. You could have just killed a load of people, which is tends to be a reoccurring theme in
Mm.
all of these machinations. I think they are like, it's often you're entering into. I can't even imagine what these meetings go like. What are we doing today? Well, we're organizing some bombings in a few months. All right, and what we're meant to do, I don't know. We got to get these Muslims to look like they're bombers. Or well, that will be. I'll give them a backpack and some money, and they'll be in there because people are desperate anyway. So I mean, the whole thing is it's really hard to work out how you'd even start it off, but it's not
It
as simple as I've said. Go on.
it's very dark. It's the kind of mentality, the kind of personality um, that can do that kind of thing and can manipulate that many people and can stand by and watch that kind of thing happen. Because even if we forget all the conspiracy stuff and we say that those guys they didn't do it on their own. There's
Mhm.
always this, and to denigrate us as conspiracy theorists when pretty much every significant event in human history was down to a conspiracy of some kind. I mean, even if it's just a conspiracy between George Bush and Tony Blair to make sure that they got both their countries to go along with their invasion,
Hmm. Yeah.
and the well-known conspiracies about what was it, that Catherine Gunn, where there was an NSA memo asking for information about Security Council members, um, and stuff that could be used to to strong arm them into going along with the resolutions that they needed to go along with to make the war happen.
Mhm.
and she leaked that. And I mean, there's a great film, Official Secrets, with Keira Knightley
Hmm.
about Catherine Gunn,
All right.
and that kind of the sort of bravery that it takes to and that, but then you also you look at things like that and you think, oh, was it a conspiracy rabbit hole? But then they ended up trying to do it for the Official Secrets, and it was because of the legal team that she had and the way that they'd crafted her defense,
Mhm.
which was absolute genius, just for the record, in terms of lawyering. And the
Mhm.
government basically had to withdraw the thing, and because they couldn't, and it was things like that. There's a few times that happens where someone
Mhm.
is brave enough. I mean, Ed Snowden as well,
Mm. I'm
who
I'm 50-50 on Ed Snowden. I feel that there was an operation there that they were to that information was coming out anyway, and if they're in control of how it comes out, they can also create the antithesis. And Greenwald, oh, it's suspicious. All of this, all of it. The way they've like switched allegiances. I think like lots of people I talk to seem to assume that they must have compromise on some of these people, and that when you look at their lives, it's like always easy to compromise them. But I
everyone could be
just
compromised.
yeah, yeah, indeed, indeed. And I do accept that as both a warning and criticism of going too far. I do try and walk a line. So like I say I'm 50-50. I'm willing to turn around and say, personally, I think Snowden was a bit of a construct. And I believe Greenwald is one of those who are like allowed to be semi-establishment whistleblower sort of journalists. I find the same with Matt Taibbi and other people like that on that sort of scene, Aaron Mate. And I know loads of people are like, oh, they're independent and they're really important. But then you look at what they do and they kind of like it is a very like I call it the neo-establishment underneath. But again, I
I
can
mean,
be wrong
to be
as
honest, I
well.
try and take the information that they produce on face value, and I look at it
Yeah,
myself to see if it makes
that's
sense. And in some
massively important.
cases, like I mean, Matt Taibbi, um, he gets some gold stars from me just for coming up with the Goldman Sachs is um, a vampire squid on the face of humanity. And I mean, his
Easy
research.
one, no, easy
Oh
one.
no, it's an easy one. It's just a nice turn of phrase. But I mean, he
Yeah.
did some of his work during the financial crisis. There was a lot of stuff that I read by him where he actually helped me understand some of the shenanigans that were going on.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I agree with Ryan Christian from Last American Vagabond about the Twitter files, how it's all just been screenshots and snippets, and but they've said that they're going to release actual stuff, and it doesn't happen, and it just seems a bit like a some sort of musky sort of psyop type thing.
There's hegemony there. Taibbi's dad has also got links to this like underbelly establishment, and the person he worked with on the Exile in Russia. I can't remember his name. I can never remember his name. It's so annoying. Um, oh, it's always on the tip of my tongue. It's one of those. They wrote a book together. I think it's called The Exile something something something. It's a very racy book where Matt Taibbi says lots of naughty things, and so does his co-author and co-guy for The Exile. But he said it's Amos. I think his last name may be Amos. Anyway, he said that basically Taibbi knows he's going to follow in the footsteps of his father and enter into establishment stuff. And I started looking into Taibbi, and then it was like, you know, It wasn't long before I was coming across him praising CFR members and other people who was like, oh, they're all running this circle. And then
Yes. Yeah.
when they outed the Hamilton 68 stuff and the stuff for the Twitter files, well, that's an information dump. That's what the intelligence agencies do. They finish that project, so they just info dump out all of the information, and everybody goes, oh, now we know everything. Let's move on. And it's actually, there's a whole layer of reasons why they were using that stuff to do whatever, and people are just, they see the information dump and just go, oh, that's solved, problem solved, we have all the information, but they haven't come to the conclusion of what that information means and what the information you're still not being showed means. And I feel that Taibbi is one who is walking in the same like walking along with people who are doing the same job as he's doing in different areas.
Mm.
And so all of these people, they pump out the same people. It's the same people that someone like Russell Brand would have on as guests. A lot of the people who Russell Brand would have on as guests, people are like, oh, yes, I agree with them. I agree with them. And I agree with them. I agree with them. But then I look into them and I go, I'm a bit worried about who they are and what it really means, because a lot of what you're given, if you're listening to someone, it's probably because you've been tricked into listening to someone. That
Mm.
tends to be the good
Yeah.
rule of thumb nowadays. So these characters who are like, the establishment says this really important person like Seymour Hersh has this to say about what happened at Nord Stream. Everybody goes, yeah, okay, I'm going to believe everything he says. Yes, I heard. So then Aaron Mate starts writing articles. Taibbi starts saying things. All these different people. Seymour Hersh, Seymour Hersh, Seymour Hersh.
Mm.
And the same tentacles of this octopus, a different type of octopus than the one Taibbi was talking about with Goldman Sachs, is out there doing the same sort of like sucky stuff that sucks. Right.
Yeah.
So we're coming to the
Gold in
end.
my sacks, as they
Ed,
say.
right at the end, we've had a chat about a load of different stuff. We were going to talk about some subjects in particular, but I had a feeling
No,
that this
well,
would
we covered
happen.
what we were going to talk about because we'd
Yeah.
started on the 7-7, and it did take us about an hour to get there, but I feel like
Mm,
it was an
mm,
interesting hour as well of
mm, yeah.
just covering lots of different bases. The thing is that it's not until you start doing that a little bit that you actually begin to start to see how things are connected together. If you spend too much time down one single rabbit hole, you forget all of the other ones, and it's it's a bit like a frog lily pads, hopping between lily pads on a pond, kind of thing. It's a nice way of putting it, but it's you have to skip around a bit because all these things are connected. There's no um, certainly big events, 7-7 bombings, 9/11, invasion of Iraq, COVID, etc. It's all they're all links in a chain, like I was saying.
Hmm. Yeah, big moments in a massive
Mm.
chain that is all over the place. And once you realize how things work, you start to see how it can all be manufactured to be the way it is. And that's I mean, what's going to be your aim for the future then? Are you going to keep on the meme front? I suppose you're talking about like working within like doing AI stuff now, so I suppose that's going to be all of the rage, and that'll take off. Where do you see us going in the near future with that?
Um, well, as far as the AI goes, I think it's going to integrate the same way other technologies have. The only problem is that the other side can use it for much more nefarious facial scanning control stuff. So that's where the memes come in, because I just hope that some of the memes that I put out get seen by people who are just germinating questions and just starting to say, hang on a minute, are these people really serious? Um, and in between the memes, hopefully they'll see some of my other tweets and connect with some of the people that I'm connected with on places
Yeah.
like Twitter. Because it's not just me, there's a whole movement of people who don't get the sort of recognition, or not recognition, but don't have the same sort of follower base that I do.
Mhm.
Um, but I do what I can to try and amplify them if I can. Vaccine injured people, particularly. Other memers are good if there are memers out there who aren't following me, and yeah, go for it, because um the memes, they keep me going as well. It's art therapy. I joke about that
Mm,
sometimes, and say, look, this isn't art, it's therapy. And
mhm.
it's like an abused kid drawing pictures of their abuser. That's what I do
Yeah.
when I'm mucking around with pictures. And it's also just having a laugh. I mean, one of the nicest comments I get from people is, I was having a really bad day and I've just come across one of your memes and you've just got me in stitches. And I've just had a look at your account and I'm still laughing and you've made my day better. I love that. If you can make
Yeah.
one person's, if everybody set out to make one other person's day a little bit better spontaneously, without expecting anything, without being asked,
Mhm.
just go out and try and make one person's day a little bit better. If we all did that, the world would bloody change overnight.
Yeah, that's an awesome message. And I have to say, George Bush painting the second explosion on the towers is one of the best memes in
It's
history.
still my favorite. It's actually one of my first ones.
Really?
Yeah, and it's one
I
of those
can hear
ones.
Bob Ross. I did the meme of it. I did the caption for it, and just gonna paint this one a little friend. That's just oh, oh, it's terrible. Oh, it's terrible.
But
Um,
sometimes you can capture a moment, and you can capture an entire decade or an entire paradigm shift just by a simple little image. And
mhm.
I never set out to actually create something like that when I made that meme. I was just combining pictures. But when I did it, I was like, oh, that's good. And
Yeah,
it's not, yeah, sometimes you got to give yourself a bit of credit too. It's a good thing.
yeah, excellent. Thanks, hey, thanks for coming
Thank
on
you.
and talking. Thanks for talking.
So much fun. I'm always happy to come back and chew the fat with you, amigo. Been
Rockin'.
excellent fun.